So what is it like to socially interact with different people when you're in prison?
So in prison, it's about respect and communication. So even if you know, don't like an individual or a group of individuals or a race of individuals, you still communicate. So whether you know it's blacks versus whites, Sureños versus Norteños, if you're not actively at war with each other, then you communicate. You're playing softball together, we playing basketball, we playing football, we got leagues going, and all these different things. And then yes, when there's an issue, you having a fight, you having a riot, whatever the case, maybe 2 or 3 back to back to, you know, you resolve the issue or whatever it is. But once that's over and done with, you might still have the same or some of the same people on the yard, and you communicating, you're talking. You're not, okay, well, we just had a riot with him and he punched me in the eye or he stabbed me or whatever the case, so now, you know, I'm not talking. The prison politics supersedes that. So you're still, you go function, you go be respectful. You're not disrespecting a person because y'all had a riot. You're not trying to stab this person because, you know, he beat you up or whatever the case is. That happened. It is done. It happened for whatever reason. Now we're moving on, unfortunately, until the next time. But in between those times, you're communicating, you're functioning, you're talking, you're being respectful. It's still, you're still socializing. You're not limiting yourself to just blacks, just northerners, just Sureños, just others. You know, you're not doing it. You're socializing across all of these racial demographics. And then when you come home and you got people that don't want to socialize with you either because they're biased, because they're prejudiced, because they're racist, because they're scared, or a combination of all. But it's like, what are we doing? We're cutting ourselves off from humanity. It's like, you know, I come home from prison and I communicated with individuals that absolutely couldn't stand me because I was black. But in between anything that was going on, we still function. I mean, I wasn't holding nothing against them. Hey, that's how they are. They don't, you know, like me because I'm white and they black, or I'm white and they're a Sureño. Okay, that's their problem. I'm not gonna hate them because I don't have people problems like that. So I would play sports with them. If we were able to play sports with them, we would get leagues going, or we would, you know, interact, work out on the, you know, whatever the case may be. But it wasn't nothing that we held against each other in between having issues. There was never tension just to be tension. Oh, well, I don't like you, so I'm not going to communicate. I'm going to create tension. It wasn't like that. And then to come home and have people absolutely not bother to speak, communicate, socialize because of a, you know, whatever they got going on within them, that was part of, you know, a big culture shock because it wasn't like that 20 years ago. And I would think that, you know, now things would be more diverse because you have, you know, more of a younger generation. I believe like the majority of the population now is like 25 to 35. So it's like a bunch of people are young. So where are we getting this, like, this divide from? And I mean, I can't even answer that question, you know, but I know that it's still a challenge sometime, even 4 years later, that people really don't like to communicate the way I'm used to, either in prison or before I went to prison. So that is a, you know, that's a big challenge socially, because you're cutting yourself off from humanity, or you're being forced to be cut off from humanity and the people that you're supposed to be, you know, communicating, getting along with outside of work. It's like you have no social life outside of work.
So did this come up with things like greeting people walking down the street or asking for directions?
Yes. So I would, like, you know, ask people how they're doing. Yeah, predominantly women, because I've been around men for the last 17, 18 years. So it's like, I'm not going to be like, hey, man, how you doing? I mean, and that would come up, you know, hey, brother, how you doing? Asking different people, but especially for women. And I understand that women get a lot of harassment, you know, so it's kind of like, you know, hey, I don't want to be harassed. I'm just going to act like I don't hear you. I'm going to ignore you. And I've actually stopped a woman one day and was like, hey, you know, you made eye contact. I said hello, or, you know, hi, and you just like turned your head and, you know, kept walking. She's like, oh, I thought you was going to try to get at me. I'm like, well, you know, you made eye contact. I said hi, and I actually kept walking. And so it isn't like I was making an approach towards her. It was just something that she thought was going to be the issue. And so, you know, they put on, like, you know, I guess the mean face, as a lot of people like to call it. They put on the mean face so people don't approach them because they get a lot of harassment, a lot of unwanted attention, and it's absolutely understandable when it comes, across, all racial divides, all demographics, creeds, and colors, whatever the case may be, even social status, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that that's where we are at a society today, because we come out of prison and we deal with so much, and we think that, okay, I'm over this hump, I'm over this hurdle of all of this divide in prison, because there's so much divide and division in prison. The prisoners against the COs. Then you have the free staff. The guards are trying to scare the free staff into not being overly friendly with the inmates because of manipulation. Then the inmates against themselves. So there's a bunch of divide in prison, and they got that old saying, divide and conquer. It's a bunch of divide. So then when we're dividing ourselves, in a free society, nothing that's motivated by race, by strength in numbers, by colors and gangs, but we're in free society and we're willingly dividing ourselves, we're like, watering down humanity. It's like, oh, I can't even rely upon the people in free society, because they're, in some ways, they're worse, or at least not them being worse, but the communication and the socialization is worse than in prison, when you have 100% criminals. And we got a better communication system in prison than free people on the street. And that's a problem. That is a problem.
Definitely sounds like a problem. One thing we heard a lot is when people, especially taking BART and sometimes other public transportation, where people would bump into people and not apologize, and how that was interpreted.
Yes, so they don't know. People that's on BART, they're going about their way. And I used to tell people this when I taught, when I facilitated classes in prison. The person that may bump into you that you take offense to, let's say he's in a rush. Like, why did he bump into me? He doesn't even know that he bumped into you. Why didn't he recognize he bumped into you? Because his mind is preoccupied. But what is his mind preoccupied with? He just got a phone call. What was that phone call about? He just got a phone call that his wife or his child was in a bad car accident. So he's trying to get to where they're at for their safety and security. So he doesn't realize everything that's going on. And that's one example. It could be a bunch of different things that a person may be going through, and we may not be privy to that. All we know is that, hey, we was in prison, and that's a respect issue. You bump into somebody, you say, excuse me. You step on somebody's shoes, you say, excuse me. I mean, I do it to this day. I was at a club the other night. It was crowded, bumped into a guy, and I made sure I grabbed him, patted him on the shoulder, like, hey, man, my bad, excuse me. Like, oh, man, don't worry about it. Because they understand, or that person understood, it's a crowded environment, stuff is going to happen. You're not going to be able to really move about without bumping into somebody. But because where I come from is still within me, and that's a form of disrespect to bump a person, step on a person's shoes, not say excuse me, to just think, oh, well, this ain't prison. This is society. This is free society now, where you can't bump into nobody and not say excuse me. It's common courtesy. However, when it does happen, for those coming out of prison to think that that may be somebody disrespecting you, we know when it's disrespect and when it's not. We know when somebody bumps into you and it comes with a look behind it. We've been in prison, we know, so we can't use a person just bump into us and, oh, he disrespected me. Well, we know there's things that follow when someone intentionally does it, because we've done enough time in prison. We probably did it to somebody else in prison, where we intentionally do it, give them a look behind it to let them know that we intentionally did it. But when a person bumps into you, and then when they keep going, and then you look back at them, and they haven't even began to turn back and look at you to acknowledge what they just did, it wasn't on purpose. So we're good judges of character based on where we've been and a lot of stuff that we've been through. So we know when someone's disrespecting us in the least way versus when somebody is not. So we can't really hold the public to that same standard, because you don't know what you don't know. We're hypersensitive to a lot of stuff because our survival depended on it. But society haven't been through what we've been through. And if you're made it out of prison as a lifer, you've been through the cognitive behavioral therapy. So you know better. You know more than the people on the street know about different things. So we got to help them out. as well as we help ourselves, we gotta help the public out as well.